Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of That's All, Folks. I'm Marie Osman, and we'll be hosting this brand new and exciting podcast, which brings creators of all walks of life together to talk about their work, their passions, and their experience within the industry. Today, we have two very special guests with us, being Scarlett O'Malley, a DJ, radio presenter and producer and record collector since she was 13, and I definitely was not that cool at 13 years old. She's also had her first documentary released with BBC Radio 4 called Being Jackie Wilson. She's also had her first documentary released with BBC Radio 4 called Being Jackie Wilson. We also have Natalie Nasr, an actor, writer and director who just had her short film Annie Shared Her Location doing the festival circuit, and we'll be talking a bit more about their projects as this podcast goes on. Hello ladies, thank you for joining us today.
Hi.
How are we feeling?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Good. I'm well. I'm really excited to learn about your experiences and talk about your work and what it's like being a woman in the creative industry.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
So, shall we start from the very beginning? Tell us about your background.
Me first, or?
Yeah, you go for it.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm half Danish, half Lebanese. But as you can all hear, I sound American. I went to international school, so I'm like one of those people. But yeah, I was born in Saudi, then moved to Lebanon, was raised there. I lived in Copenhagen for a few years. And then I moved to LA for theater and film school and did some acting and filmmaking there. And then I moved to London.
And yourself?
Born and raised in London, so boring, been here my whole life. I should be grateful because a lot of people wish they were born and raised in London. And I went to uni to do history. I thought I was going to be a historian, which I still love, and I'm still going to always work with history and do stuff to do with history. But I used to make people listen to old soul music at uni, and everyone's like, you should do a radio show. So I got a radio show, and I remember sitting down and like a light bulb coming on. I was like, this is all I want to do for the rest of my life. So it kind of started from there, and then the DJing came through, and I had a couple of DJs in, and they were playing records, and I was like, I've got that obnoxious 20-something-year-old telling these DJs that have been in the scene for however long that I've got all their records. And they were like, well, put your money where your mouth is and come and DJ. And I was like, I don't know, I couldn't. I was quite shy. And then it just all started from there. I kind of then realised that, that was also something that I loved. And so it's just been, that was probably like 7 years ago now, 7-8 years ago. And since then, I've kind of done everything under the sun within the creative industries, music-based, I left uni and I was running events as an event producer, and I've worked for various podcast companies, and I've run a radio station, and I've kind of done it all whilst also presenting and DJing. So yeah, busy.
It's something that's, very current, I think, in this day and age, is people aren't just doing one thing. You always have to be juggling different things.
It's
and I think
really annoying.
But it also makes you really well-rounded and, ready for anything that comes your way, I feel.
Because it's forced on you. It's so frustrating. Like, I would love to just be a DJ. Like, I would love to just present radio, but now you're expected to be the whole package. You're meant to be like a social media exec. You're meant to be able to produce and record and blah, blah. And don't get me wrong, I love the fact that I can do a little bit of everything, because that is, that's my personality, but there shouldn't be anything wrong with just wanting to DJ.
Exactly.
But it's, I think a lot of people have a struggle within the music industry that they're expected to be the whole package. And if you're not, it's like, well, you're not doing this one thing. It's like, well, look at everything else that I'm doing. And, builds up a lot of competition. I mean, flip sides of the coin, it's healthy, it's unhealthy.
And finding that balance as well.
Yeah.
You did speak about the light bulb moment. And what for you was the light bulb moment? Like, this is what I want to do for my life. This is the path I want to be on.
Well, it started when I was 7, and I was obsessed with Shirley Temple. I would just watch all of her movies, and I was the youngest of 3 boys. I grew up in the Middle East, so I was an attention hog. And I think I saw Shirley Temple. I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to be a performer just like her so that I can get the attention. If I'm being completely honest with myself, I think that was the spark. And then I actually did join my drama sort of school within my school, or classes, and then did some shows. And I was like, wait, actually, I really enjoy this. And just kept doing theater all throughout school, and then did some films throughout school as well in LA. I would travel there every summer and just do a few feature films, and then come back and go back to school. And I think it just kind of grew from there. And then eventually I moved from the theater world into the film and TV world and realized that I really loved acting for film and TV. And then I obviously, like you said, had to dabble in directing and producing and writing because it wasn't enough to just be an actor. Because the money is not enough when you're first building yourself up, unless you're really lucky and you just book right off the bat, which is very rare.
Or you're from a very rich family.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially as a freelancer as well. You have to think, okay, when is the next job coming? But it keeps things exciting.
Exactly. But yeah, then I started dabbling in film and TV, and at first wanted to just write my own material so that could sort of like launch me into my career even further. And then realized very quickly that if I was going to write all of my roles, then I don't know if I would ever write anything that was really good. So then I started focusing more on writing material that I was passionate about, which is how Annie Shared Her Location was born. And yeah, now I guess I act, write, direct, produce / let's keep the list going.
Yeah,
exactly. Build that CV up.
Build it up.
Experience up. Exactly. So you both started doing what you love in some way at a young age. 13.
Oh, no.
How did this begin? The 50s and 60s music?
Yeah, I mean, I was brought up in a household that was the only music that we listened to. Like, my dad was a 50s, well, that's what he's a musician, and that's the type of music he plays. So we only listened to like 50s vocal harmony groups in the house. Like, that was it. And when I left uni and went to, a different place with different people, I was like, you guys didn't just listen to Elvis growing up. Like, this is so weird. No,
Really?
I'm the weirdo. Yeah. So I only started record collecting, in all honesty, because I've always been obsessed with subcultures and identity. I think that's where the like love of history and music come together, because a subculture is always based in music, fashion, identity. And it's something that we look to. So, like in the 80s, it was super 50s inspired, which is why my parents were into the 50s stuff. And so it was more like being able to buy records that were like, I love that song and I've just found a physical copy of it. Or, I grew up when HMV was still a big thing, and I used to go and like buy all my records or like my favorite bands. I think it's just about having the physicality. And obviously when I was growing up, I've been obsessed with music probably since about the age of 8 or 9. First it was the 80s, and I was like 8 years old. My dad's like, you've always been obsessed with George Michael. So it was just about, you always had CDs, and then I think when I was 13 I got my first iPod, but you were always buying physical copies. So I think it just started more from that, and being able to actually own the music that you love, and it just carried on. It just carried on. I used to go to a lot of car boots and do up charity shops and stuff like that. And yeah, so I've just been collecting since then. I think it's only probably in the past 3-4 years I've taken it very seriously. And, every time I go to the States, I take an empty suitcase to fill up to bring back.
Oh, I love that. Especially nowadays where everything's just available on Spotify.
Exactly.
I'm so curious to hear how you feel about that.
About Spotify?
Yeah, about like the fact that everything is so readily available now versus like back in the day you had to buy an album, like you said, and that's the only way.
Use LimeWire.
Yeah,
I forget. Yes,
poor virus
so true.
computers, honestly. I'm not coming across to be like a nostalgia pro person that's like, oh, back in my day, because I find it so boring. Like, things have to be new to push on. Fresh music, fresh talent.
Fair.
There's just because I'm love subcultures doesn't mean that I'm not going to love subcultures that are created in the future. I do think, though, the allowance for everything to be so readily available makes, one, a lot of us really lazy, and two, this is why trends come around so quickly. So how we've just had like the whole 90s thing, then Y2K, blah blah. Back in the day there'd be 20 to 30 year cycles between each subculture. It's like the 50s finally made it background in the 80s because people became obsessed with 50s stuff, and it would always go in cycles. Like now we have like a turnover of like 6 months. If you look at, say, TikTok, and how each month there's a new TikTok song, that's how quickly the cycle works now, because it's too readily available. So I think as creators, it's just, like you were saying, you have to do a bit of everything. It's also ramped up the thing that it's like things move so quickly at light speed, it's very hard to keep up. Whereas,
I think with buying records and sitting and listening to them, it does allow me personally to just slow down and appreciate what I'm listening to. Like, you hear the scratches, you hear like you just hear the nuance of the music rather than just going on Spotify or listening to something on YouTube, and it makes it more special. You actually listen to the album from start to finish. I find that just, I'll pick that song, that's my favorite, I'm just gonna listen to it on repeat.
Yeah, and I think the same actually also goes for, like, I don't know if you guys agree with this, but for film and TV, whereas like 10, 20 years ago, there weren't as many TV shows, there weren't as many films, or even as many actors that were playing all these different roles. And now there's so much content out there that it's almost overwhelming, and it diminishes sometimes the art.
It really does. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, actually, because I'm a big TV and film person. I'm trying not to monopolise on that because I love it so much. I don't want it to also become work, like how music has.
Fair.
But I feel like the golden era of film and TV was like the 90s and 2000s. Like though all my favourite films, like American Psycho, came out in that kind of era, and all those. Whereas now it's all just like remakes, sequels, bootlegs. Not saying all of it, obviously, but because there's so many actors and Netflix can just pop out content like that. It's I think it lessens our want and need for it, and also the quality and high turnaround. I mean, Elvis has just come out, and I thought that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen.
I still haven't seen it.
So good.
I still haven't seen it.
So good. Austin Butler was just out of this world.
Yeah, if he doesn't win every single award under the sun.
I know. I think it's supposedly going to be an Oscar nominee, but I don't know. But I hope it does.
Crossed.
Well, what else has come out? Who else is in the running for it? Who else would really run for it?
Yeah, I
Let's be honest.
don't actually know. I thought maybe Don't Worry, Darling, because it was a big thing at Venice, but then a lot of people, which is
so much drama behind it.
Yeah, so much drama.
But on the other hand, with so much content coming out, so many films and episodes and series, I also think it gives people the opportunity. It gets people on set, people having jobs, people able to gain more experience. And I also think that is so important.
That's a really good point.
Especially with the remakes. I'm like, oh, they shouldn't have remade that. But then I'm thinking, okay, it means another generation gets to, work their way up the ranks as well.
That's a really good point. It is true. It's like at the end of the day, I guess in a way, what we just spoke about was from an audience perspective, but then from a performer's perspective, it is really nice to have all of that, all those different opportunities, and
but
you said,
why can't
the
you have
chance
those opportunities with new ideas and fresh films?
Oh yes, you can, but I meant more the amount of stuff that's being made. There's
in that
more
sense,
quantity.
There is more,
But I agree. Also, new stuff would be great.
So you have your short film, Annie Shared Her Location. Tell us about it. I've seen it. It is great. It is relatable. But tell us how you came across the idea, what inspired you to do it, and how you got your team on board as well.
Well, firstly, thank you for watching it and for your feedback. That means a lot. So for those of you who don't know, Annie Shared Her Location is a short film based on different women's experiences with different forms of sexual harassment. So the film is sort of shown or displayed in a series of vignettes. So it goes from minute-long scenes from different forms, like I had just mentioned, from catcalling to groping to receiving unsolicited photos to, to rape to walking alone at night and sort of looking around you and grabbing your keys for protection in your fist and things like that. So that's what the film is about. It's based on real women's experiences. So the idea was born at the beginning of 2021, where I started feeling really afraid of walking home alone at night. This was right after the Sarah Everard story just came out, and things like that happen all the time.
Where were you living at the time here?
I was living in London, and it just ignited a lot of fear in me, even though I knew that this was so common. And so I started, calling my friends while I was walking home alone, and I would grab my keys and put it in between my fist. I would take Ubers home all the time, even though it costs so much money to do that. And I was so frustrated by that. I was like, why do I have to keep adapting my behaviors and implementing these safety measures into my everyday life? So that I can ensure that I'm safe and not raped. Why is that? How is that normalized? How do we live in a world that normalizes this kind of behavior? Yeah. And then I had a nightmare about different rape scenarios, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I wrote them all down, and then I wrote a script about it, and I was like, I need to make a movie about all of the things that we as women do every single day that we don't talk about, that perpetuates rape culture, like the, silencing ourselves when someone catcalls us, or like the, sharing your location, texting your friends, I'm home now. We don't talk about how abnormal that is, and we don't discuss those things. We only discuss the more quote unquote horrific things. I mean, they are horrific. I take back the quote unquote. But what I'm trying to say is that I think that if we started the conversation earlier on and talked about those smaller things, then it would start to dismantle rape culture a little bit more and not lead to the bigger things.
Society has definitely made all the scenarios in your film just a norm, unfortunately. I mean, the catcalling, the should I put my earphones in? I've definitely been in those scenarios. Not sure about yourself.
Yeah, I mean, everything you just said, it was, I think for me, the most heartbreaking thing about the Sarah Everard thing was that it was a police officer. So then it was also like a person in a position of power that you're meant to trust. I think that also on the flip side, I think is another social issue that we have as women, that we're often subjected to things by people we're meant to trust, and it's quite hard to hear when you talk about all those things because, as a woman, I don't know one single woman that hasn't been through some kind of issue that has been subjected to them by a man. And so, it's quite like, it's like kind of hit a nerve with me. I'm like, oh, it's actually so frustrating. I only get Ubers home, only because I'm not putting myself in a situation. I've personally never been chased at night, but I've had people that I know like chased down my street by random men. But that's like one thing, and if anyone ever catcalls me or says anything to me, I'm either dirty looking or I'm screaming at you.
Same.
And then you sometimes get the backlash of like, like whatever, and you're just like, shouldn't be like this.
Yeah, exactly.
And you also get the feeling, okay, I want to express myself, like F off, like your character did. And I was so like, yes, that's what I would do. But then it's situations where you're thinking, are they going to get out of their car? Like,
exactly.
How safe am I in this situation?
Exactly.
I think I should be able to express how I'm feeling in this moment.
Yeah,
exactly.
So my friend's dad always just said, act crazy. Literally start speaking in tongues, scream, do whatever. And I'm always like, but I've thought this when walking home and, someone's a little bit too close to you, or I think as a woman, you grow up and you have a sixth sense, and your sixth sense is danger, which is fucked. Like we should be built to be like that. But I've had it and I'm like, right, if he gets any closer, I'm pretending like I've got some kind of madness.
Yes. Or walking a certain way,
and it's crazy that we have to do that to ourselves, that we have to adapt our behaviors. Like it's just, it's insane to me.
I've had this discussion actually because I've got an agent, so and my agent's a male, and I was like, okay, so part of my deal when I do gigs is that there will be an Uber booked for when I come back, when I leave a DJ gig. And it was like, oh, well, like when the night tube's starting again? I was like, I'm not putting myself at risk. They can afford an Uber out of whatever money they've got. And so that's just kind of like blanket rule now. Like I will get an Uber at the end of the night because, as I said, I used to live in deep West London, a lot of gigs I'm doing in the East. What you expect me to get 3 night buses home, take 3 hours to get home.
It's safety over everything.
Yeah.
Even when I think about booking Ubers, it's pricey. But then I need to get home. I need to make sure I'm safe.
Exactly.
And what I loved was at the end, that quote you had.
By Royce and Ross.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, because the onus is put on us to think about our safety. Like my housemate, he goes out for a jog. It's 7 p.m. Like, I wish I was able to do that. I was able to go to the corner shop and not think, okay, it's getting dark now. And I want to talk about a scene in particular in the kitchen when you have the couple together.
Yeah.
And I think that was just another scenario that isn't spoken about enough. But also,
domestic violence.
Yeah. But also, what would you say to people who would say that that scene was a bit too visceral, too graphic in a sense, or triggering?
I mean, I think all of it is triggering. Obviously, that last scene is more intense and visceral, like you said, than the other one. So it is definitely more triggering. I think that if you're feeling triggered by watching that scene, then definitely, turn your laptop or TV off and take a break and take a breather and walk away, because it is triggering. So I would just say, be kind to yourself. And also challenge yourself to watch that stuff, because it happens all the time and it's hard to see, but reality is not always, rainbows and butterflies. We have so many dark sides of the reality that we don't always depict on TV and film. And I think it's important to depict that kind of stuff in TV and film so that we can begin to, I guess what I'm trying to say is we can begin to understand that it's not all positive, and and really make strides towards changing things in society, because film and TV it's all we have really to sort of, like, the media is all we have. I mean, radio as well. And of course, like books and podcasts and these things, like, we are able to share so much information out there. So why not share the bad stuff as well as the good stuff, so that we can, you know, teach society to sort of change.
About, like, changing the narrative.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've recently seen Killer Sally on Netflix.
I haven't.
But it's a documentary about domestic violence, you know, massive spoiler alert. So really sorry if you're about to watch it, but it makes such a poignant point to your point, is that she got put away for 25 years because she ended up shooting her husband and killed him, but he used to beat her up all the time. But it's like, why is a battered woman getting 25 years in prison when she's been beaten her whole life? So it's things like that now, and that was in the 90s. I think now in today's society, there's a little bit more lenience, but only because we're like, women can't keep on getting beaten up and prodded and poked and sexually assaulted and just expect us to lie down. Like, attitudes need to change. So things like your film are definitely a push forward into, like, this is what happens, this is not okay, and definitely looking out for the victim a lot more.
Exactly. There's another documentary that's exactly like that called Lorena, which is also about a woman who, you know, moved to the United States and was married to a man. He also sexually harassed her entire relationship, marriage, and she bit off his penis because that was the thing that was hurting her. Yeah,
that went against Sally and her.
Which, like, bravo to you.
Yeah. I think it's the way that we think in society that really changes. So that's why we need stuff like your film to show, this is what happens, this is not okay. When are we going to stop blaming the victim? Like,
to raise awareness, to highlight that stuff, to start discussions and conversations.
As women, we've literally been taught from the day we're born that, you know, don't wear a short skirt too revealing, you'll distract the boys at school. Don't do this because it's blah, blah, you'll get in trouble. Like, we're always told. I remember when I first got my period and my mum went, don't tell anyone you've got your period, as if I should be ashamed. Like, don't tell anyone you've got your period at school because this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. Everyone has, well, not everyone, but, you know, women have periods. So why is it not normalised? But and yet we have to, like, neatly, secretly take away our pads and put them in blah, blah. And I was 10 years old when I got my period. So, you know, I was super young. Yeah. I was in primary school.
Yeah.
This is normal. This is nature. Why are we not told? But we're always told, like, hush, be ashamed of your body, be ashamed of this, cover up, don't show that. It's so frustrating. And then on the flip side, you show a little too much skin and it's like, oh, she's this, she's that, she's blah, blah.
Exactly. There really is no winning. There's only us being ourselves and putting out messages there that we want to portray, that we need society to pick up on and follow. And with your film, where are you hoping it will go? Like, it's on the festival circuit at the moment.
Yeah, it's at on the festival circuit, so hopefully it gets in to some festivals. That would be nice. But actually, there were, at the screening that you were at, or you weren't there.
I was,
but Ruth was there.
Ruth was.
There were two women's organizations. One was from the Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organization, and the other woman was a representative from the North London Rape Crisis Centre. And both of them have actually shown interest in taking the film further and using it within their organization for educational purposes and for workshops for young women and also for their staff. So I hope that it does go down that route within educational formats and schools and universities, because I think it could be a really great learning platform for a lot of discussions to sort of open up, kind of like it did at the screening.
Yeah.
So I think that's the hope, just for it to start conversations really and raise awareness on the subject matter.
It definitely did start conversations in my head.
I'm glad
to talk to you about it.
Yeah, you too.
And Scarlett, you are, well, both of you are in very male-dominated, you know, industries. With DJing, how have you found, you know, diving in there and, you know, just making your voice heard?
It's interesting because I think when I started out and I was an event producer, I definitely saw the massive gap that there was, because, you know, I was 24. I think I was 23 actually. I was 23. I'd just come out of uni, and I was running these, like, nationwide events all across the country. And I'd show up to venues and I'd be like, oh, right, the decks aren't going to fit on this table. You know, we're going to have to change this. And I'd just get looked at like, you're a little girl, shut up. I remember once actually, I won't say the venue, but it was in Clapham. I hope it's closed down now. I actually got called a fucking bitch by the manager.
Wow.
Because I was like, or I think it was a little bitch. He's like, you little bitch aren't going to come in here and tell me blah, blah, blah. And then the 2 DJs that I'd booked, 2 older males came there like, oh, we're going to need a table for the decks. He's like, yeah, of course I'll get it sorted. But of course, because I was a young girl, I didn't know what I was talking about. You get really underestimated. I've also been in a position, I don't want to just go on the negative because I love DJing, and there's people out there that are doing so much for women at the moment. People like Jaguar, who's got her Future DJs initiative on BBC One, you know, amazing, doing it for the girls. My friend Eliza Rose just had #1, like doing it for the girls. Like there's so many of us that are going out there and working towards making things a lot more equal. But likewise, you know, I've also had unsolicited attention or people prodding and poking at me from promoters, from punters. You're kind of expected to do what you're told, and if you question it, you're being a diva, you're being a bitch, you're being this, you're being that. But I'm now going things like, I'm just going to pretend I'm a man. So every time I get offered something, I'm like, okay, what's the fee? Okay, because I used to be too scared to ask about money because it's like, well, it's not right to talk about money, or, you know, it's seen as an aggressive thing. Yeah, it's seen as I don't know. And I've had my fair amount of struggles with punters, and that comes from men and women, to be fair. Men and women, just I think as a DJ, as a female DJ, I hate that term, but you know, it's what I am. You kind of get looked at like you are there to entertain, you are there to give, whereas
you're human.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my favorite one is when you get the sound engineer just looking over the mixer, just he's like, oh, you're clipping a bit, and then the hand comes over and touches the mixer to turn down the volume. You wouldn't do that to a man. You wouldn't, because you'd be told, you know, it's not appropriate. But because you're a woman, it's like, oh, you wouldn't know how to use the equipment, or you wouldn't know how to use that. So there's just so many things where, you know, I love my job and I love what I do, but there's still work to be done.
Of course. And what was a scenario or the key moment that made you think, okay, this is when I start acting like a man, like you said, like taking...
I really don't think there's been a key moment. I think I've had a lot of chats with a lot of people. Right. I'm one of those people that will ask advice from anyone because I don't often trust my own opinion when I should. I'm kind of like a collator. I just collate a lot of other people's opinions.
You take your own at the end.
Yeah, and then I make my own at the end from everything else. I'm very much like to learn from a lot of people.
Yeah.
But recently, the girl I've just moved in with, she's in the same industry, and her mum are just like, business. This is business. So my mum is a soft touch, right? And I talked to my mum about this stuff, and she's like, oh, well, you know, maybe if you could just see what you can do. And then I speak to my friend's mum, and she's like, put me on the phone to them now. And I was like, oh, this is the energy I need in my life. Like, she's worked in the music industry. She used to work as a music manager.
Nice.
And I feel like since being with them and since, you know, living in this house with my friend, it's just kind of given me a bit of a punch of life. And I'm not saying only this week if I decided to be, you know, business bitch 101.
Right.
But you need to constantly be filled with confidence and filled with, you know, these pushes. It's like, this is business, this is your career, you take control. Because I kind of, you know, for the past, say 2-3 months since festival season has, you know, been and gone, I've left a lot of my career up to like male authority counterparts, and I've kind of realized recently, I'm like, that's not what I want to do. Like, take your power back, remember why you're here. You know, I've worked super hard for all these years on my own and got this far on my own. Take it back. So I've just kind of had that realization recently.
I found that being an actor, it's only in the last 6 months I've been like, okay, what is the fee? Okay, I need expenses added to this, or I need an Uber. Like, being powerful with my voice and not being afraid of, oh, they might not want to work with me again.
Yeah.
Or this might, you know, be detrimental to me getting a role. I always think that in those scenarios, anyone who doesn't really take serious my safety or how I feel about a particular scene, whether it's intimacy, it's not someone I want to work with. And being fine in that position and being, you know, confident with, this is my decision, this is how I want to lead my career. If you respect it, great. If you don't, bye. I don't.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in no.
Yeah,
I've
so much.
recently started saying no to a lot of things, and it's like, I'm definitely in a bit of a transition period at the moment where I'm just like, I'm definitely taking my power back. And that's not to say I wasn't powerful before, but just powerful in different ways. And recently, you know, I think listening to your gut and listening to your head and being like, that's not right for me. I've said no. You keep on asking. I've said no, you know, and that kind of thing. It's difficult. The music industry is such a strange one because there's so much like professing for equal lineups and, you know, oh, we really want this or we really want that or you're a woman, blah, blah. But talk is cheap at the end of the day. Yeah. You can say like, oh, we need women on lineups, we need to do this, but you're booking the same.
Action?
Yeah, or you're booking the same 5 women for everything. But why is there not more equality on lineups?
Yeah.
And with your acting and working in front and behind the camera, how have you found your voice and, you know, saying no when you...
You know, it's interesting because I feel like when I did start stepping behind the camera more often, I did feel, if I'm going to be completely honest, like my voice didn't matter as much as the male figures that were on the sets that I was on. And I could feel that energy. And I think at the beginning, I kind of hesitated and I didn't know how to sort of, you know, step into my voice and say no and, you know, stand up for myself because it was the beginning stages of my career on that end. And I was afraid, like you said, that people wouldn't like me and wouldn't want to work with me again. And, you know, I didn't want to be the bitch on set.
Like,
it's so annoying.
I've been changing that mindset.
You would never, ever, ever think of a man like a man is just putting you in there, putting his own thoughts and opinions out. But if you do it, you're a bitch.
Exactly. I hate that term as well. It's just, we should cancel that term. I hate it. But yeah, I guess now I've also just started to say no and to stand up for myself and to sort of be the bossy bitch on set. The boss on set.
Yeah, I have to say, I've really noticed the difference when I did my documentary. I worked with 2 women. So it was just me and 2 other women. And I've got to say there's so much more to be said because obviously I was working on this project for a year and a half from, like I say, from doing the pitch to getting the pitch in to then producing it and whatever, because I produced and presented. And then, you know, throughout that time, we're all going to have different things going on. We're going to have hormones, we're going to have periods, we're going to have life situations, we're going to have tiredness. So just being able to be like, I'm actually having a really bad mental health day, like maybe today isn't the best to talk about X, Y, and Z, and it's understood. Whereas when you have, you know, as I said, I work with a lot of men in the industry, and when I'm like, okay, so today isn't a great date for me, or blah, blah, and it's like, I think you're being really reactive. I've had that before.
Gosh.
You're being really reactive and da-da-da-da, and I'm just like, this is why I don't want to work with men. and that I'm really trying really hard at the moment. I've got a bit of a thing where I'm trying not to talk about men in an absolutist term, because I used to do that a lot and used to be like, men are.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that doesn't help anything because people hear that and just switch off.
Yeah.
So I'm now trying to take it to very personal situations.
Yeah.
But I just do know that when I work with women and we're all on a level, it's very understood.
Yeah.
And with your documentary, that must have been very exciting for you going to New York.
I feel like I've had a baby and just given it away. I'm like, where's my child?
That's what it feels like.
It feels like it feels like you're brewing this baby. You go through the anxiety, the tears, the highs, the lows, and then you finally give birth and you're like, where is my child?
It's out in the world.
Yeah, no, I feel really grateful. So it's actually, it came out on the 5th of September. It's actually getting replayed on my birthday, on my 30th birthday on the 19th. So it's getting played on BBC Radio 4 then.
Happy early birthday.
I know. I was like, there's been so many signs that have come to me. So so it's being Jackie Wilson. It's about soul singer Jackie Wilson. Yeah. I visited his grave when I was in Detroit 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And it was the most blustery, like rainy, horrible day. And I went to his grave and I put my hand in his grave and I swear the sun came out of the trees. And I was like, and then I went to a record shop and there's this big picture of him on the wall. And the guy that runs it was like, oh, funny you say that. One of his other children came in a couple of years ago and we got a picture with her. And
if that isn't a sign.
I know. And then when I got home, he went, oh, it was 3 years ago today that she came in, and he sent me the picture. He's like, what is that? He's like, this is a sign that you were meant to be here on this day.
Wow.
So there's just been a lot of like affirmations that like this is meant to happen at this time.
Yeah.
And you know, it got pushed by Six Music, it got pushed by Radio 2, it was picked up for Pick of the Week, had a double page spread in Radio Times.
It's been doing well.
It did really well. I've been really, really, really happy with it. And I just think
it's
now,
a really good.
Yeah,
good
no,
show.
It's really, but you must have this, like when something comes out and you're kind of like, what do I do with all my energy now? Where what I felt there was definitely a sink after where I took some time off because I'd been solidly working. I was burnt out. I worked on that while doing festival season, which was so intense.
Wow, yeah, that does sound intense.
And then I come out the other end and I'm like, okay, so what's my passion?
Yeah, like what's next?
What's next? And everyone's like, take some time out. I'm like, I'm not that girl. I'm not about, I mean, I went to the States because I wanted to give myself a birthday present. And I was like, you go and live your life, bitch. I know you hate the word bitch, but I'm calling myself living the life.
No,
and,
do it.
So I had a great time. But yeah, it's just kind of like, it's strange. It's so great to have out in the world, and it's so many people who've given me great feedback, but also I'm like, oh, I wish I could just work on it for a bit longer.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
it
I
was
think that's
great.
a good point. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think that's a good point that you made, going to the States and having some you time, even though you wanted to work on the next thing, right afterwards. I do think that taking a little bit of a break can also inspire you more for your next creative projects. Exactly.
You 100% need it, because I think the way that I look at it and the way I look at brains and things like that, growing up, you're a sponge because your brain isn't full. By the time we've reached this age, we've got so many skills. Your brain is at capacity, which you can't just pick up languages or just pick up this.
Yeah, I wish I could.
Yeah, I know, so do I. But so it's kind of, so when you're working on something, your brain is working at constant capacity. You're constantly like firing the neurons out and just getting the brain going. You can't just go dip, 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 because your brain needs to free up space to allow, new ideas to grow, new inspiration to grow.
100%.
And although it doesn't feel like at the time, like when I was in the States, I was like, okay, come on, inspiration, hit me. Like looking around, like, where is it coming from? I think now coming back and then having moved out and doing all these new things, I'm like, right, I've got that new lease of life again.
Yeah.
And
You've
someone
got to
said
give
that.
yourself the time to refresh. Otherwise, you have this burnout.
Yeah.
Especially in the creative
Oh, I've
industry.
been burnt out so many times.
Yeah, and it's
And
hard
that's the
to just
worst.
recuperate and get back on that. So I find that the more little breaks I take, if it's just like a weekend away or going to a gallery, doing something I want to do for myself that isn't necessarily creative, going to the gym, it just gives me that extra motivation to go back even harder with the projects that I've got lined up or what I want to do for the future. So creative industry is all about your community, having those circle of friends who are going to lift you up, encourage you, push you to, really pursue what you want to do. And I just wanted to talk about how you guys are building your own community and paying it forward, because we have these opportunities ourselves, but it's also important to, okay, you see a friend who wants to get in, how do I help them? What am I doing for my community and the future?
That's a good question, actually. I think like within the DJing world and the events world and all that stuff, we're all pretty supportive of each other. I definitely have done, a lot of things where I try to kind of give back, especially like I come from quite a working class background and we had no fucking money growing up. And you realise how hard it is for people that aren't nepotism babies and have an auntie or uncle that work at the BBC or something like that. It's very, very, very hard having to do free internships and making your voice heard, and also having that worry that, when I went to uni, I was told that I spoke a certain way and that I got made fun of for the way I spoke. When I now, if I was the same person I am now, I tell them all to fuck off.
Yeah, rightly so.
Just because why do you always use this London slang? It's like, suck my dick. Okay.
Yes.
So I would 100%, it's about instilling confidence in people. So through my production company that I did, being Jackie Wilson for, we're called Little Cactus. We're a CIC, so we're based towards, our mission statement is helping people from our backgrounds, so working class backgrounds, ethnic minorities, people that just don't have an instant into the industry. And there's 7 of us that work. I really want to work on doing workshops helping young working class women get into the audio and the music industry, and whether that's just through doing panel talks and inspiring some conversation, workshops in just how to pitch or creative thinking workshops and stuff like that. I really think it's so important. I get my phone blown up all the time with people asking for advice. Trust me, I don't know what I'm doing half the time, but I really want to make sure that no one finds it as hard to get into the industry as I did.
Exactly. You want to make it easier for anyone. And even just, put in someone's mind, oh, this job exists. You could do that. If you have these skills, that is matched to it as well.
Exactly.
And what about you, Natalie?
I think that it's already hard enough to make it into the, filmmaking and acting industry, just like it is for music, right? So I think that working with your community of friends and people that you have worked with in the past that you like to work with, and to just keep building that and to keep creating projects together is the best way forward that I've found. So, you work on this short project, you find a few people that you really vibe with, you're like, great guys, let's work on our next project together. Let's write something together. Let's have a sort of like writing session. Let's work on this project. Let's do that together, and just keep collaborating and using each other to create more and more projects, because it sucks to just wait around for the phone to ring. It sucks to have someone say yes that's on the higher up. Like we have so much opportunity to do things ourselves.
Create your own opportunities.
Yeah.
You need to be
That's what you have to
proactive.
do.
Yeah, you have a director friend, you have a producer friend, you
Get
have
together.
an actor, you have a DOP, you have all of these people already at your fingertips. Like that is your community. So why not create things that you're passionate about and just like take back the power?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's easier said than done sometimes.
Of course,
Just
of course.
gotta have
But
the
it's also
encouragement.
not, you
Yeah,
know?
no, I
It's
agree.
like
I
you
think-
don't have to make a, Steven Spielberg film.
Of
You can
course.
make like a small TV series with your friends in your backyard
On
with
your
on your
iPhone.
iPhone.
Yeah.
And who knows where that'll go. And as long as you're just like creating and releasing that energy, I think that's what matters most,
Yeah,
at least to me.
exactly.
I agree. I once
Yeah.
did like a radio production course with the Bauer Academy. When I'd just been made redundant and blah, blah. And it was actually so inspiring because the guy was like, you can do the most with the bare minimum. He's like, your phone, you can record podcasts, you can do this, you can do
Yeah.
that. And I found it really inspiring because he's like, let's do this as if we have zero money, we have zero budget. What can we make? So we'd make jingles and we'd make this and we'd make that and adverts. And I just found stuff like that. I thought it was really inspiring because it kind of gave me the push that you don't need the fancy mic. And, I didn't
Not
actually
at
have a
all.
DJ set up probably until about 2.5 years ago. And people used to ask me to do mixes. I'll record it at home. I said, with what? I hate when people buy the equipment before they've even started DJing. They'll just like splash out $6,000 on CDJs and stuff and be like, oh, can't DJ. It's like, I was schlepping to the Roundhouse to like use their
Oh,
Yeah.
But that's
that
where
was where I
creativity is
started
born.
as well.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
Roundhouse just created so many opportunities.
They're really good for
people.
young
Hampstead
people.
Theatre as well. And I feel bad because back in the day, there were so many free things for young people to do.
Yeah.
And you've got the cuts with the arts and it's getting harder. But again, I think TikTok, Instagram,
Just keep on making.
yeah, it
basically.
just shows you that
Yeah.
people can make something out of very little. And that's what
Oh,
I've
exactly.
done a lot of my life as well.
Yeah.
But thank you, ladies, so much for coming down and speaking to us and sharing your experiences within the creative industry.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, it's been so fun.
Thank you for joining us on our first episode of That's All, folks. Join us next week where we'll have 2 more creatives talking about our experiences in the creative industry. Take care and see you later.